The bullies target twin black girls. They didn't know they're fierce fighters. The sun hung low over the school, casting long shadows on the sidewalk as Nia and Naya made their way through the gates. They moved in unison, as they always did. Their matching red hoodies and khaki pants stood out against the sea of green and navy blue uniforms that most students wore. The twins had a natural sense of confidence, a quiet strength that many admired but few understood. As they walked, Nia noticed the stares. She could feel the eyes on them, especially the mocking glances from some of the more popular students. The twins weren't like the others. They weren't part of any clique, and they had never cared for the judgment of the high school social ladder. But that didn't stop the whispers, the glances, and the occasional snide remark. The girls never let it show, but the weight of it all was starting to wear them down. "Don't let them get to you," Naya whispered, noticing the way Nia's posture stiffened. "We've been through worse." Nia smiled faintly and gave her sister a nod, grateful for her reassurance. She didn't mind being different, not really. But it was hard when every day felt like another battle to hold on to their identity, another fight to be seen for who they were rather than what others assumed them to be. The sound of laughter cut through the air, and Nia turned to see a group of girls in the distance leaning against the lockers. At the front of the group stood Sarah, the queen bee of their school. Her followers, a mix of wealthy and popular girls, surrounded her like she was royalty. They were known for picking on anyone they deemed different, and Nia and Naya were prime targets. As the twins approached, Sarah's sharp voice carried over the hum of the hallway. "Look at them," she said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Aren't they adorable?" The twins trying so hard to fit in with their little matching hoodies. "Too bad they'll never make it." Her words dripped with venom, but there was an edge of something else there. Fear. The twins kept walking, ignoring her as they always did. But this time Sarah didn't let it slide. She stepped in front of them, blocking their path. The sudden stop forced Naya to look up, meeting Sarah's smug gaze. "You think you're too cool for this school?" Sarah sneered, flicking a lock of her perfectly styled hair. "Newsflash, nobody cares about you. You'll always be the weird ones. Maybe you should stick to hanging out with the other misfits." Naya felt her blood boil, but she remained quiet, her hands clenched at her sides. Nia's eyes narrowed, and for a moment she felt something dark stir inside of her. She knew the right thing to do was to keep walking, to keep her head held high, but something about Sarah's taunting words made her heart race. "Just let it go," Naya whispered, her voice low. Nia turned to her sister and saw the quiet pain in her eyes. They had always been a team, each twin having the other's back. But lately it seemed like the weight of the world was pressing harder on Naya. She could see how it affected her. The quiet way Naya started to withdraw more and more, how she kept her head down instead of holding her ground. It hurt Nia to see her sister struggle, and she knew that if they didn't do something soon, the bullying would get worse. "You think it's cute to pick on people?" Nia finally said, her voice calm but firm. "Do you think it makes you better than anyone else?" Sarah raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting a response. "What's the matter?" she mocked. Are the little black girls mad now? Poor thing, that was the final straw. Nia stepped forward, her chest puffing with the confidence that had always been there. But now it burned with a new intensity. "You're nothing," she said, her voice cold and unyielding. "And you'll never be anything." The words hung in the air for a moment, leaving a tense silence that settled over the group. Sarah stared at Nia in shock, not used to being challenged, and for the first time, her arrogant smirk faltered. But then, as if to assert her dominance, Sarah swung her hand toward Nia's shoulder, shoving her back. "You don't talk to me like that," Sarah hissed, pushing her again, harder this time. But Nia didn't budge. She stood her ground, refusing to let Sarah or anyone else make her feel small. As Sarah stepped back, Nia felt the anger bubble inside her, threatening to explode. But she didn't let it. She kept her calm, something she'd learned to do over the years when dealing with people like Sarah. "You don't scare me," Nia said quietly, but with enough force to make Sarah's eyes widen. "We won't let you tear us down. Not now, not ever." With that, Nia grabbed Naya's hand and the twins continued walking down the hallway. Behind them, they could hear the snickers and whispers of Sarah's group, but this time the words didn't sting. As they turned the corner, Naya's shoulders sagged in relief. "That was close." Nia looked over at her, her expression softening. "We have to do something. I can't stand seeing you like this, Naya. You're stronger than this." Naya shook her head. "I don't know if I can keep dealing with it. Every day it's the same thing. It's getting harder to ignore. Nia's heart ached for her sister. She knew the constant bullying was taking a toll on Nia. The quiet, confident girl who had once walked through the halls with her head held high was now retreating, hiding behind her hood and avoiding eye contact. It broke Nia's heart to see her like this. "But we're a team," Nia said, squeezing her sister's hand tighter. "And I'll never let them get away with making you feel less than what you are. We're stronger than they think." Nia smiled faintly, grateful for the reassurance, but the doubt still lingered in her eyes. That night, as they sat in their bedroom, the twins talked long into the evening. The conversation was quiet but filled with determination. Nia suggested they start practicing martial arts, something that could give them both the physical strength to defend themselves, as well as the mental strength to face whatever came next. They agreed, knowing that it would take time, but it was the first step toward reclaiming their confidence and their peace. The next day at school, as Nia and Nia walked down the hallway once again, they held their heads higher. The whispers still followed them. The mocking glances still burned, but something had changed. They had made a decision. They were no longer going to sit back and let the bullies dictate their lives. The twins had the power to fight back, not just with their fists but with their minds, with their resilience. As they approached their lockers, Sarah's voice cut through the air again. But this time Nia didn't flinch. She turned to face Sarah, her expression calm but fierce. "Touch me again," Nia said, her voice steady. "And you'll need surgery?" Sarah blinked in surprise, clearly thrown off by the twins' newfound confidence. But instead of responding with her usual snide remark, Sarah turned and walked away, her group of followers trailing behind her. Nia and Nia exchanged a look, the unspoken bond between them stronger than ever. They were no longer just two girls trying to survive high school. They were warriors in their own right, ready to fight for themselves and each other no matter what. And from that day on, things were never the same again. The days that followed were filled with a mix of tension and quiet determination. Nia and Nia continued their school routines, but something had shifted in the way they walked, talked, and carried themselves. They were no longer the girls who let the whispers of Sarah and her group slide off their shoulders. They had tasted the power of standing up for themselves, and it had ignited a fire within them that refused to go out. However, as much as they tried to remain focused, the bullies did not let up. Sarah seemed determined to make their lives as difficult as possible. Every day at school, she and her friends would find new ways to target the twins. Whether it was making cruel jokes about their appearance, spreading rumors about them, or physically shoving them in the hallways, the harassment never stopped. At first, Nia and Nia thought they could handle it, but slowly the constant pressure began to take its toll. One morning, Nia noticed Nia walking slower than usual. Her shoulders were slumped and her eyes were dull. It was a stark contrast to the energetic and confident twin Nia had always known. "Hey, what's wrong?" Nia asked softly as they made their way to their first class of the day. Nia hesitated for a moment before answering. "I'm just tired, Nia. I don't think I can keep pretending like it doesn't hurt." Nia's heart sank. She had known for a while that the bullying was affecting Nia, but hearing it from her own lips made it real. The girl who had always been strong and composed was now starting to crumble under the weight of it all. "I know it's been hard," Nia said, her voice gentle but firm, "but we can't let them win. We've come too far to give up now." Nia didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the ground. The weight of the world seemed to be pressing down on her, and Nia could feel it too. She didn't know what more they could do to stop the bullying. Every attempt to stand up for themselves had only made things worse. Every confrontation with Sarah had been met with more cruelty, more taunting, more isolation. The bell rang, signaling the start of the school day, and the twins separated to go to their respective classes. Nia couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness that had begun to settle in her chest. She wanted to do more for her sister, wanted to make the bullying stop, but she didn't know how. It was during lunch that things finally came to a head. The twins sat at their usual spot in the cafeteria, away from the crowds. They had become used to the stares and the whispers, so they didn't mind the solitude. Nia tried to distract Nia by talking about their plans for the weekend, but the conversation fell flat. Nia picked at her food, her mind clearly elsewhere. Suddenly, the doors to the cafeteria burst open, and in walked Sarah and her entourage. The popular girls sauntered into the room like they owned it. their eyes scanning the room until they landed on Nia and Naya. Without hesitation, Sarah made her way toward their table, a smug grin on her face. "What's up, losers?" Sarah sneered, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Still playing the 'we're too cool for you' game?" Nia's stomach churned as she watched Sarah approach, but she refused to show fear. She had faced worse than this, and she wasn't about to back down now. But as Sarah stopped in front of the table, something about her presence felt different today. There was a coldness in the air, a sense of malice that made Nia's skin crawl. Sarah didn't waste any time. She shoved Naya's lunch tray, causing it to slide off the table and crash onto the floor. The cafeteria went silent as everyone turned to look. "Oops," Sarah said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Didn't see that coming." Naya looked down at the mess on the floor, her face flushed with embarrassment. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. The humiliation was overwhelming. Nia could see her sister struggling to keep it together, the weight of the day's events finally breaking through her walls. Without thinking, Nia stood up, her voice loud and clear as she confronted Sarah. "That's enough. Sarah, you've gone too far." Sarah smirked, clearly unfazed by Nia's words. "Oh, look at you. Playing the tough girl now? How cute. Maybe you should take a seat before you make things worse for yourself." But Nia wasn't backing down. "You think this is funny?" she asked, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and frustration. "You think it's funny to treat people like this just because they're different?" The tension in the room was palpable, and for a moment it seemed like Sarah might back off. But then, as if to assert her dominance, she shoved Nia once more. This time the force of the push caused Nia to stumble back, her eyes welling up with tears. The sight of her sister in pain was all it took for Nia to snap. She stepped forward, ready to defend Nia with everything she had. "Touch my sister again," Nia said, her voice low and dangerous, "and you'll regret it." Sarah's grin faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "Oh, I'm so scared," she taunted, rolling her eyes. "What are you going to do, huh? Cry about it?" Nia's fists clenched at her sides, her body trembling with the urge to fight back. But just as she was about to take a step forward, a voice rang out from behind them. "Hey, what's going on here?" The principal, Mr. Edwards, appeared at the entrance to the cafeteria, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. The students around them began to whisper, but no one made a move to intervene. Sarah quickly straightened up, putting on her best innocent face. "Nothing, Mr. Edwards, just a little misunderstanding. Nothing to worry about." Nia's anger flared, but she held it in check, knowing that a confrontation with the principal would only make things worse. Instead, she turned to Naya, who was now sitting quietly, wiping away the tears that had escaped. "This isn't over," Nia muttered under her breath, her eyes fixed on Sarah. "We'll take care of this. Naya, I promise." The bell rang again, signaling the end of lunch, and the cafeteria slowly returned to its usual hum. Sarah and her group walked away, casting one last glance at the twins. Nia could see the satisfaction in Sarah's eyes, the belief that she had won. But Nia wasn't so sure. As she looked at Naya, her sister's tear-streaked face and downcast eyes, she knew that something had to change. They couldn't keep going on like this. They had to find a way to fight back, not just for themselves, but for each other. Later that night, as the twins lay in their beds, Naya couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about what had happened in the cafeteria. It wasn't just the lunch tray or the shove that had hurt Naya. It was the constant barrage of insults, the feeling of being invisible, of being less than everyone else. And it wasn't just Naya who was suffering. It was both of them. They couldn't keep letting Sarah win. They had to find a way to make things right, to take back control of their lives. In the quiet darkness of the night, Nia made a decision. Tomorrow she would take Naya to a local martial arts dojo. They would train together, build their strength physically and mentally. It wasn't just about fighting back against the bullies. It was about reclaiming their power, their confidence, and their sense of self. And when they returned to school the next day, they would no longer be the easy targets. They would be fierce fighters, ready to face whatever came their way. The next day after school, Nia and Naya walked in silence, their thoughts heavy with the events of the day. The confrontation in the cafeteria had left its mark on them both, and while Nia had been filled with fiery resolve, Naya felt something else, a quiet sense of defeat. She knew her sister was doing everything she could to help her, But no matter how much they tried to rise above the bullying, it felt like an endless cycle. "We can't keep doing this," Naya said softly as they walked toward the parking lot where their mom's car waited. "It's just too much, Nia." Nia glanced at her sister, her heart aching. She understood. The constant harassment, the taunts, the whispers, it was wearing them both down. But giving up wasn't an option. She couldn't let Sarah and her group win. They couldn't keep walking around feeling small, hiding from the world, afraid to stand up for themselves. Something had to change. "I know," Nia replied, her voice firm. "But I have an idea. Something that will give us the power to fight back. Not just against Sarah, but against all the things that are holding us down." Naya's eyes flickered with curiosity. "What do you mean?" "I've been looking into martial arts," Nia said. "There's a dojo not far from here. We can learn to fight, to defend ourselves, not just physically, but mentally. It'll give us the strength we need, not just for school, but for life." Naya hesitated for a moment, unsure. "You think that'll really help?" "I know it will," Nia said with conviction. "We don't have to take this anymore, Naya. We don't have to let them treat us like this. We're stronger than they think." Naya's lips twitched into a small smile, though the doubt still lingered in her eyes. "Okay, let's try it." That evening they drove to the dojo. The building was small but inviting, with a sign outside that read, "Strength through discipline." As they walked inside, the smell of leather and wood filled their nostrils, and the sounds of punches landing on pads echoed through the space. A tall man with broad shoulders looked up from behind a desk, his eyes sizing them up with a calm, assessing gaze. "You here to sign up?" he asked, his voice deep but warm. Nia nodded. "We'd like to learn martial arts. We want to be able to defend ourselves." The man raised an eyebrow. "Defend yourselves from what?" "We've been getting bullied at school," Naya answered quietly, her voice tinged with frustration. "We don't know how much longer we can take it." The man's expression softened and he motioned for them to follow him. "I understand. Training isn't just about learning how to fight. It's about building strength from within. You'll learn discipline, respect, and self-control, and when you're ready, you'll find that you can stand up to anything." Over the next few weeks, Nia and Naya threw themselves into their training. At first it was hard. Their muscles ached, their bodies not used to the intense physical exertion. They were pushed harder than they'd ever been before, but with every bruise and sore muscle, they grew stronger. Nia thrived in the dojo's structured environment, her competitive nature pushing her to excel, while Naya struggled with self-doubt. She felt weak compared to the others, unsure of her own ability to fight back. But Nia never let her sister fall behind. Every time Naya faltered, Nia was there to encourage her, reminding her that they were in this together. Slowly, Naya began to find her own rhythm. She started to believe in herself, to trust in her own strength, and with each passing day they grew closer, their bond deepening as they learned to fight side by side. Their sensei, Mr. Washington, was a quiet but fierce man. He was tough but never unfair, and he pushed them to be better not just for their own sake but for the sake of each other. "In this dojo," he would say, "we fight for ourselves, but we also fight for those around us." The stronger you are, the stronger they are. It wasn't just about learning how to land a punch or block an attack. It was about learning how to control their minds, how to stay calm in the face of fear, and how to never give up. They were taught that the true fight was not against the bullies or the obstacles in their way, but against the doubts they had about themselves. The twins came to understand something that had eluded them before. Fighting wasn't just about physical strength, it was about mental resilience. It was about standing tall in the face of adversity, even when everything inside you told you to quit. One day, after a particularly grueling session, Naya looked at Nia, her eyes shining with newfound confidence. "I think I can do this. I think I can really stand up to them." Nia smiled, pride swelling in her chest. "I know you can. We both can." They continued training, pushing themselves harder, and with every session they felt stronger, more capable. But it wasn't just their bodies that were changing, it was their minds, their hearts. They were becoming fierce fighters, not just in the dojo, but in life. The weeks went by quickly, and before they knew it, it was time to return to school. Nia and Naya walked through the school gates once again, but this time there was something different about them. They no longer walked with their heads down, afraid of what others might say or do. They walked with purpose, with confidence, their posture straight and their eyes steady. The whispers that had once followed them seemed to fade into the background, no longer able to penetrate the shield of self-assurance they had built. They weren't the same girls who had walked into the school weeks ago. They were stronger, more focused, and ready to face whatever challenges came their way. As they entered the school, they could already feel the eyes on them, the stares, the judgment. But this time it didn't matter. They had learned that what others thought of them didn't define who they were. They were in control of their own story. The next time Sarah tried to push them around, Nia and Naya wouldn't back down. They had the strength to stand their ground, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. They were ready for whatever Sarah or anyone else had to throw at them. That day, as they walked through the hallways, they didn't just see a group of students. They saw an opportunity to change the narrative. They were no longer victims of bullying. They were the ones writing their own story, and they had the power to make it anything they wanted, and so they did. The days after their training were filled with anticipation and unease. Nia and Naya had become different people, their inner strength matching their outward appearance. They were no longer walking around with their heads down, trying to avoid conflict. Instead, they stood tall, ready to face whatever challenges life threw at them. But even as their confidence grew, there was still a lingering fear in the back of their minds. What would happen when they saw Sarah again? What would it feel like to face the bullies who had tormented them for so long? It wasn't long before they got their answer. The school had been buzzing with rumors about the upcoming pep rally. The whole school was excited for the event, but Nia and Naya were dreading it. It meant they'd have to face Sarah and her group once again. The twins had worked hard to control their fear, but the thought of being publicly humiliated again made their stomachs churn. Despite everything they'd learned in the dojo, the thought of confronting Sarah still sent a shiver down their spines. That afternoon, as they walked into the gymnasium for the pep rally, they could feel the eyes of the entire school on them. The lights were bright, and the noise from the crowd made the air feel thick with tension. Nia and Naya made their way to the bleachers, trying to blend into the background. But it was impossible to avoid the whispers. "There they are," someone muttered. "The weird twins. They think they're tough now because they're taking martial arts," another voice sneered. "They're still nothing." Nia and Naya exchanged glances but didn't respond. They had learned that ignoring the insults was often the best way to handle it. But today was different. Today they felt the weight of every mocking word, every pointed glance pressing down on them. They tried to stay composed, but the atmosphere in the gym felt suffocating. As they sat down on the bleachers, Naya's eyes flicked over to Sarah, who was standing with her usual entourage. Sarah shot them a glance, her eyes narrowing with contempt. It was clear she hadn't forgotten about the lunchroom incident. She had always prided herself on being the center of attention, and the twins' defiance had taken her by surprise. But it was a surprise she wasn't going to let go of easily. Before the rally could begin, Sarah made her move. She walked toward the twins with her usual smirk, her group following her like a pack of wolves. Nia's heart raced, but she didn't flinch. Naya, on the other hand, tensed beside her, the familiar anxiety creeping back into her chest. Sarah stopped in front of them, her voice cutting through the noise of the gym. "Well, well, well. Look who decided to show up," she sneered. "I guess the freak show is complete now." Nia stood up, feeling the familiar surge of anger rising within her. But she took a deep breath and reminded herself of everything she had learned. This wasn't about fighting Sarah. This was about standing her ground, showing that the twins weren't afraid anymore. "We're not here for your games, Sarah," Nia said, her voice steady. "We came to watch the rally, not to listen to you." Sarah's grin only widened. "Oh, I know exactly why you're here. You're here to show everyone that you're not afraid of me. But guess what? You are. You're nothing without your little dojo lessons, and everyone knows it." Naya, who had been silent up until this point, stood up next to Nia. Her voice was quiet, but there was strength in it. "We don't need to prove anything to you, Sarah. We've already won. We're not the same people we were when we first walked through these doors, and we don't need to fight you to show that." Sarah's face twisted in disbelief. "What are you talking about? You think you're better than me now?" "No," Naya said, meeting her gaze without flinching. "We just think we're better than we used to be." For a moment there was a tense silence. The crowd around them had quieted, sensing the tension between the two groups. Sarah's smug expression faltered as she took in the twins' calm, confident demeanor. She wasn't used to being challenged, and it seemed to unsettle her, but Sarah wasn't going to back down. She wasn't the type to lose control. She took a step forward, leaning in close to Nia and Naya. "You think you've won? You think you've got it all figured out?" she hissed. "You're still the same little girls who don't belong here. You'll never be part of the crowd, and I'll make sure of it." Nia and Naya stood their ground, their posture firm and unwavering. They weren't going to let Sarah get the best of them anymore. Nia stepped forward, her eyes locked on Sarah's. "You're wrong," Nia said quietly, but her voice was full of conviction. "We're not trying to fit in. We're not here to please you or anyone else. We're here for ourselves, and that's something you'll never understand." For the first time, Sarah's expression softened just a fraction. The reality of the twins' words seemed to sink in. She had spent so much of her life trying to tear others down to build herself up. But in that moment, Nia and Naya's words made her question her own actions. She had always been the queen bee, the one who controlled the social hierarchy, but the twins weren't playing by the same rules. They weren't afraid of her. They weren't afraid of anyone. For a brief moment, Sarah stood there, staring at them as if processing what had just happened. Then, without saying another word, she turned and walked away, her followers trailing behind her. The tension in the gymnasium broke, and the crowd slowly started to murmur again. But Nia and Naya didn't pay attention to the whispers. They didn't care what anyone else thought. They had stood up to Sarah, and that was all that mattered. As the pep rally began, Nia and Naya sat back down on the bleachers, their hearts still racing from the confrontation. But there was a sense of peace between them, a quiet understanding that they had finally taken control of their lives. They had faced their fears, and they had come out stronger on the other side. In that moment, Nia realized something she hadn't fully understood before. The bullies didn't have the power. They had only given them power by allowing their words and actions to affect them. But now Nia and Naya knew that they were the ones in control of their story. They weren't going to let anyone dictate their worth. They had the strength to rise above the hate, to rise above the fear, and to fight for themselves in ways they never thought possible. And as they sat there, side by side, watching the pep rally unfold before them, they knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more battles ahead, more obstacles to overcome. But together they could face anything. Together they were unstoppable. The following week felt like a turning point for Nia and Naya. It wasn't just the feeling of relief that came after standing up to Sarah. It was something deeper, a shift in the way they saw themselves, the way they held their ground, and the way they viewed their own worth. It was as if the universe had responded to their courage, pushing back the forces that had once made them feel small. No longer were they the quiet, timid girls trying to survive high school. They had become the strong, confident women they had always longed to be. The first day back after the pep rally, the atmosphere in the halls felt different. The whispers were still there, but they were quieter, less biting. The tension that had once seemed overwhelming now seemed to be melting away. And for the first time, Nia and Naya felt like they had control over their own narrative. The way the other students looked at them had changed. There was no longer the sense of pity that had once accompanied their isolation. Now, it was as if people were waiting to see what they would do next. As they made their way to class, Nia couldn't help but notice the shift. The stares that once made her self-conscious now felt like the beginnings of respect. People were beginning to realize that the twins were no longer to be underestimated. They had fought back not just with their words, but with their actions, and now their presence commanded attention in a way it never had before. But as much as they wanted to savor the change, Nia couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was still missing. She knew that standing up to Sarah had been a victory, but it didn't feel like the battle was truly over. There was still a part of her that wanted closure, that wanted to understand why Sarah had treated them the way she had for so long. That afternoon, after school, as Nia and Naya were walking to the parking lot, they were surprised to find someone waiting by their car. It was Sarah. Nia's heart skipped a beat. The last thing she expected was for Sarah to come to them, especially after the public confrontation at the pep rally. But here she was, standing with her arms crossed, looking almost vulnerable. "What are you doing here?" Nia asked, her voice cautious but firm. She wasn't about to let her guard down too easily, not after everything that had happened. Sarah shifted uncomfortably, her usual confidence gone. I wanted to talk. About what happened?" Naya looked at Nia, her eyebrows furrowing in confusion. Nia could hardly believe what she was hearing. Sarah had never been one to admit fault, let alone ask for a conversation. Still, she nodded, motioning for Naya to stay quiet for a moment. Talk, Nia repeated, still unsure if she could trust Sarah's sudden change of tone. After everything you've done? After how you've treated us? Sarah took a deep breath, her shoulders slumping. I know I've been a total jerk to you both. And I'm sorry. I just don't know what came over me. Nia's eyebrows knitted together in disbelief. She glanced at Naya, who seemed just as stunned by the turn of events. For a moment it felt like time had stopped. The girl who had tormented them for so long, who had made their lives a living hell with her cruelty, was now standing in front of them, apologizing. It was the last thing Nia expected. Why now? Nia asked, her voice softer but still tinged with skepticism. Why all of a sudden? You've treated us like dirt for months and now you want to apologize? Sarah seemed to shrink under Nia's gaze, her hands nervously wringing the strap of her bag. I know it's hard to believe, she said quietly. But after the pep rally, something just clicked. I don't know why I've been like this. Maybe it's because I was so focused on making myself feel better that I didn't see how much I was hurting others. I never realized how much I was making you both suffer. Naya crossed her arms, still processing the apology. And what, you just woke up one day and decided to feel guilty? Sarah looked down, her eyes avoiding theirs. I didn't wake up one day, no. But I've been thinking a lot, and seeing how you both stood up for yourselves, how strong you were, it made me feel like I needed to change. I've spent too much of my life trying to tear others down to make myself feel good. I see now how wrong that was. You don't deserve that. There was silence between the three girls, the air heavy with the weight of Sarah's words. Nia wanted to stay angry, wanted to tell Sarah that her apology meant nothing, that the damage had been done. But there was something in Sarah's eyes, something that made her pause. It was as if she was finally seeing the consequences of her actions, and for the first time she felt remorse. I don't know if I can ever make up for everything I've done, Sarah said quietly, but I want to try. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Nia looked at Naya again, her heart pounding in her chest. This wasn't what she had expected, not by a long shot. They had always thought of Sarah as the villain in their story, someone who would never back down or admit defeat. But now, standing in front of them, Sarah seemed more human than she ever had before. I'm not saying that everything is okay now, Naya said slowly, her voice steady, but I appreciate you apologizing, and I hope you really mean it. You can't undo the hurt you've caused, but you can choose to be a better person from here on out. Sarah nodded, her eyes sincere. I will. I promise. With that, the tension between them seemed to dissolve, and for the first time in months, Nia and Naya didn't feel like they were carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. They didn't have to be enemies anymore. This wasn't a victory over Sarah. It was a victory over the hatred and bitterness that had defined their interactions for so long. As Sarah walked away, Nia turned to Naya, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. I never thought I'd see the day, she said, shaking her head in disbelief. But I think she's actually sincere. Naya smiled, her expression softer than it had been in days. Maybe people can change after all. The twins climbed into their car and drove home, the weight of the school day lifting from their shoulders. The road ahead was still uncertain. There would be more challenges, more obstacles, and likely more encounters with people who didn't understand their journey. But for now they had learned something powerful. That strength came not from fighting back with anger, but from standing tall in the face of adversity and choosing to rise above it. And as they drove through the streets, the world around them seemed a little brighter, a little more hopeful. They were no longer just survivors of bullying. They were conquerors of their own fears, ready to take on whatever came next. The days that followed the unexpected apology from Sarah were nothing short of transformative for Nia and Naya. As much as they tried to move on from the events of the past weeks, they could feel the change in the air. School felt different now. It wasn't just about surviving another day of bullying. It was about growth, strength, and the unexpected paths that life could take when you stood up for what was right. The first sign that things had changed came during a routine walk to class. Nia and Naya had just reached their lockers when they heard someone call their names. They turned to find their classmate Ashley standing at the end of the hallway, her hands nervously clasped in front of her. Hey, can I talk to you for a second? Ashley asked, her voice shaky but earnest. The twins exchanged a glance, then nodded, stepping toward her. Nia could see the uncertainty in Ashley's eyes. and she immediately guessed what this was about. Ever since Sarah's confrontation, more and more students had been noticing the twins' newfound confidence. It was clear that their transformation was starting to ripple out to others, and Nia suspected that Ashley had something to do with it. "Sure, what's up?" Nia asked, her voice friendly. Ashley took a deep breath. "I've been, kind of watching how you both handled everything with Sarah, and I have to admit I was really impressed. You didn't back down, and I know I haven't exactly been the best friend to you both." Nia's eyebrows raised in surprise. "What do you mean?" Ashley shifted uncomfortably. "Well, I kind of stood by and let Sarah and the others pick on you. I never said anything, just watched. And I hated myself for it. I always thought it wasn't my business, but after seeing you both stand up to her, I realized I was wrong. I should have stood up with you, not just watched." There was a long pause as the twins absorbed what Ashley had said. For a moment, Nia didn't know how to respond. She had never expected someone like Ashley, someone who had always been a bystander, to come forward with an apology. But then again, maybe that was what made it so powerful. Ashley wasn't the only one who had been silent. There were probably many others who had witnessed the bullying but had stayed quiet, afraid of the consequences or unsure of what to do. Finally, Nia smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. "Thank you for saying that," she said softly. "It means a lot. And you're right. It's not always easy to stand up, but when you do, it makes a difference." Ashley nodded, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "I was thinking, maybe we could all work together to make sure no one else feels like they're alone like how we were. Maybe we could start a support group, for people who've been bullied or just need someone to talk to. We could help each other out." Nia's face lit up. "That sounds like a great idea. It could help so many people who feel the way we did." Nia's heart swelled with pride. She had always known that there was more to the story than just fighting back against Sarah. There were so many others who had been quietly suffering, feeling alone and unheard, and now they had the power to do something about it. What started as a battle for self-respect had turned into a movement, one that could inspire change for others, not just themselves. "I think it's time for a change," Nia said, her voice full of conviction. "Let's do it! Let's make sure no one else feels like they have to go through this alone." Over the next few weeks, the ripple effect of the twins' strength spread throughout the school. Ashley wasn't the only one to step forward. More and more students began to speak out against bullying, offering support to one another and showing solidarity with Nia and Nia's cause. The once divided school now felt like a united front, with the students coming together to create an environment where respect and kindness were valued above all else. The support group that Ashley suggested was an overwhelming success. It started small, just a handful of students gathering in a quiet corner of the school library, but soon it grew as more students came forward, eager to share their stories and find a sense of belonging. The group wasn't just about talking, it was about healing. They shared their experiences, their pain, but also their triumphs, their strength, and their dreams for the future. The twins played a major role in the group, offering their guidance and support to those who were struggling. Nia and Nia knew what it felt like to be pushed down, to feel like you didn't belong, but they also knew that no one could define their worth but themselves. And now they were determined to help others understand that too. As the weeks went on, Nia and Nia felt a sense of fulfillment they hadn't known before. It wasn't just about standing up to Sarah or fighting back. It was about making sure that the cycle of bullying didn't continue. They wanted to create a space where people felt empowered, where they could stand tall and be proud of who they were no matter what anyone else said. And the changes weren't just happening at school. Nia and Nia's family noticed the difference in them too. Their parents had always been supportive, but now they could see the strength radiating from their daughters. They were no longer just the quiet girls in the corner. They were leaders, warriors, fighters for justice. Their parents couldn't have been prouder. One evening, as they sat at the dinner table, Nia turned to her parents and said, "We've decided we want to take this further. We want to keep pushing for change. We want to go to other schools, maybe even start a foundation to help kids who've been bullied." Their mother smiled, her eyes sparkling with pride. "You've already made such an impact here. I think that's a wonderful idea." Their father, always the quieter of the two, placed his hand on Nia's and Nia's hands. "You've both shown incredible strength. Whatever you decide to do, we'll support you. You've made the world a better place just by being yourselves." The twins exchanged a look, their hearts swelling with emotion. They had come so far from the timid girls who had once walked the halls of their school, afraid to speak up or stand out. They had transformed their pain into power, their fear into action, and now they were ready to take their message to the world. The ripple effect of their courage and resilience had started in the halls of their school, but they knew it didn't have to stop there. They had the power to reach beyond the walls of their community, to inspire others, and to make sure that no one ever had to feel alone or powerless again. As they walked into the future, side by side, Nia and Naya knew that they were more than just survivors. They were leaders, champions of change, and they would continue to fight for what was right, no matter where life took them. The days after their support group had taken root were some of the most fulfilling Nia and Naya had ever experienced. What began as a small step toward self-empowerment had blossomed into something much bigger, something that had not only transformed their own lives, but the lives of many others around them. The twins had discovered something they hadn't even known they were looking for, their true purpose. At school, things had changed. The atmosphere that had once been filled with tension and uncertainty was now buzzing with hope and unity. No longer were students forced to keep their heads down, hiding from their fears or their bullies. With Nia and Naya leading the charge, they had created an environment where students could openly share their stories, find strength in one another, and most importantly, support each other in times of need. It wasn't just their school that was feeling the effects of their actions. Word had spread to neighboring schools, and students who had been too afraid to speak up before were now finding their voices. Teachers began to take notice of the changes, offering their support and encouraging the students to continue the work Nia and Naya had started. It was a quiet revolution, one that didn't involve grand speeches or bold declarations, but rather small acts of courage every single day. But as much as they had given to their school community, the twins knew their work wasn't finished. The support group was thriving, but it was still in its early stages, and there was so much more they could do. The idea of creating a larger foundation for bullying awareness and support had been discussed more than once between them, and each time they spoke about it, the idea became more real, more tangible. The world was ready for change, and they had become the spark that could ignite it. One evening, after a long day of work at the support group, the twins sat on the steps of their porch, the cool night air wrapping around them. Their parents had gone inside to prepare dinner, leaving the twins alone for a quiet moment. "I can't believe how far we've come," Naya said, her voice soft as she looked up at the stars. "Sometimes it feels like we're living in a dream." Nia nodded, her eyes filled with both pride and wonder. "It really does. I mean, I never imagined that standing up to Sarah would lead to all of this. Do you think it's enough?" Naya asked, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I mean, what if we could do even more? What if we could reach more people? Change more lives?" Nia turned to look at her sister, her heart swelling with admiration. Naya had always been the quiet one, the one who preferred to stay in the background, but now she was speaking with such confidence, such determination. It was as if the girl who had once doubted herself had finally realized her own power. "I think we can do anything," Nia said, her voice steady and full of certainty. "We've already changed so many lives, and now it's time to take that further. We're just getting started, Naya." Naya smiled, a hint of excitement flickering in her eyes. "You're right. We've been fighting for ourselves, but now we can fight for everyone who's ever felt like they didn't belong." As they sat there, the cool breeze brushing against their skin, Nia and Naya talked for hours, brainstorming ideas for their foundation. They knew it wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever was, but they were ready for the challenge. Together, they could take on the world. The following weeks were a whirlwind of planning, meetings, and discussions with teachers, community leaders, and even local businesses. It seemed that everyone they reached out to was eager to help in any way they could. The support for their idea was overwhelming, and with each passing day, it became clear that they were on the right path. The foundation, which they decided to call Stronger Together, would focus not only on providing resources for victims of bullying, but also on creating educational programs for schools, teaching students and teachers alike how to prevent bullying, how to recognize it, and most importantly, how to stop it. They wanted to create a world where no one had to go through what they had been through, where everyone felt valued and respected, regardless of their differences. In the months that followed, Nia and Naya worked tirelessly to make their dream a reality. They spoke at local events, participated in awareness campaigns, and reached out to schools all over the district. They weren't just advocating for the victims of bullying, they were advocating for change, for kindness, for a future where empathy wasn't just a word but a way of life. The foundation's impact was immediate. Schools began implementing anti-bullying programs, and students felt empowered to stand up for themselves and each other. The stories that once filled the halls of their high school, stories of fear, rejection, and isolation, began to fade, replaced by stories of hope, unity, and resilience. And as Nia and Naya watched their dream unfold before them, they couldn't help but think back to where it all began, sitting in their bedroom, talking about what it would be like to be stronger, to take control of their lives, to fight back against the people who had tried to break them. They had no idea then that they would be able to do so much more than that. They had no idea they would change the world. But they had done it. And they knew this was only the beginning. As the years went by, their foundation grew, and their message spread further than they had ever imagined. They began traveling across the country, speaking to schools, communities, and organizations, spreading their message of resilience, strength, and unity. They shared their story, how they had fought through the pain, how they had turned their struggles into strength, and how they had learned that the greatest fight was always the one within.